The gunshot echoed across the vast Wyoming prairie as Isaac Zimmerman squinted through the rifle scope, watching the deer fall. It was 1878, and life in the territory was as unforgiving as the land itself. He'd been trailing that buck since dawn, needing the meat to last through the coming weeks. As he approached his kill, the wind shifted, carrying an unfamiliar sound, a human cry, faint but unmistakable. Isaac paused, his weathered hand shielding his eyes from the setting sun as he scanned the horizon. The cry came again, this time more distinct. Isaac secured his rifle across his back and mounted his chestnut mare, steering her toward the source. The rugged landscape of eastern Wyoming had been his home for nearly 3 years since he'd left his family's failing farm in Missouri to seek his fortune. At 28, he wasn't rich, but he'd built a modest ranch 10 miles outside Galesburg, a growing settlement that served as a waypoint for travelers heading west. As he crested a hill, Isaac spotted a dilapidated barn about a quarter-mile away. It stood alone, an abandoned remnant of some failed homestead. The structure leaned precariously, its weathered boards bleached gray from years of harsh sun and winter storms. No farmhouse remained, just this solitary building slowly surrendering to the elements. Isaac approached cautiously. In these parts, caution was the difference between life and death. Outlaws, displaced natives, and desperate men of all sorts roamed the territory. He dismounted, drew his Colt revolver, and advanced on foot, leading his horse by the reins. "Hello?" he called out, his voice carrying across the open land. "Anyone there?" The answering whimper was so soft he almost missed it. Isaac tied his horse to a post and pushed open the creaking barn door, gun at the ready. The interior was dim, dust motes dancing in the few beams of light that penetrated through gaps in the roof. The smell of old hay and something else, something distinctly human, filled his nostrils. "Please," came a woman's voice, weak and hoarse. "Please help me." Isaac's eyes adjusted to the gloom. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a broken wagon, he saw her. A woman, her wrists and ankles bound by heavy iron chains secured to a support beam. Her dress was torn and filthy, her dark blonde hair matted with dirt and blood. Despite the grime covering her face, he could see she was young, perhaps in her early 20s. "My God!" he breathed, holstering his weapon and rushing to her side. "What happened to you? Who did this?" The woman flinched at his approach, pressing herself against the beam. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Water." Isaac uncorked his canteen and gently held it to her lips. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin and onto her tattered dress. "Thank you," she managed after drinking her fill. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, met his with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Isaac examined the chains. They were secured with a heavy iron padlock. "I'm going to get you out of here," he promised. Looking around the barn for something to break the lock with, he spotted a rusted plow blade leaning against the wall and retrieved it. "Who are you?" the woman asked as he positioned the edge of the blade against the lock's hasp. "Isaac Zimmerman. I have a small ranch near Galesburg." He brought the blade down hard on the lock. The metal screeched in protest but held. He struck again and again until finally the lock broke open with a satisfying crack. Isaac carefully removed the chains from her raw, bleeding wrists. "You're free," he said softly, moving to free her ankles. The woman rubbed her wrists, tears streaming down her face, leaving clean tracks in the dirt. "I never thought," she began, but her voice failed her. "What's your name?" Isaac asked gently. "Elizabeth," she replied after a moment. "Elizabeth Taylor." "Can you tell me how you ended up here, Elizabeth?" She shook her head, her entire body trembling. "Not now. Please, I can't." "That's all right," Isaac soothed. You don't have to explain anything now. Can you stand? Elizabeth attempted to rise but collapsed almost immediately. Isaac caught her before she hit the dirt floor. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her ribs through the threadbare fabric of her dress. I'm taking you to my ranch, he explained, carrying her toward the door. It's not far and you'll be safe there. Then we'll get the sheriff. No sheriff, Elizabeth said with sudden urgency, clutching at his shirt. Please, they'll find me. Isaac paused, concerned. Who'll find you? The men who put me here. They're coming back. They said they would. Isaac's jaw tightened. How long have you been here? I don't know. Days. Maybe a week. Her voice was barely audible. They left me to die slowly. Anger burned through Isaac's veins, but he kept his voice even. No one's going to hurt you again. I promise. Outside, he carefully lifted Elizabeth onto his horse, then mounted behind her, holding her securely against his chest. She was trembling violently now. Whether from fear or the cool evening air, he couldn't tell. Isaac removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders before nudging his mare forward. My dear, he remembered suddenly, glancing back toward where he'd left his kill. I'm sorry, Elizabeth murmured, mistaking his concern. Don't be. The wolves can have it. You need help more than I need meat. They rode in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Elizabeth eventually relaxed against him, her breathing becoming more regular. Isaac wondered what horrors she had endured and who had been cruel enough to chain her in an abandoned barn and leave her to die. His ranch came into view just as the first stars appeared overhead. It wasn't much a modest cabin with a small stable and corral, but it was sturdy and warm. A tendril of smoke rose from the chimney where he'd banked the morning's fire. Here we are, Isaac said softly, realizing Elizabeth had fallen asleep against him. She stirred at his voice, momentarily panicking before remembering where she was. Sorry, she mumbled, embarrassed. Nothing to be sorry for. He dismounted and helped her down, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to give way again. Let's get you inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, and a small kitchen area. A door led to Isaac's bedroom, and a ladder provided access to a small loft space. Isaac guided Elizabeth to his only armchair by the fire, which he quickly stoked back to life. The warm glow illuminated her face, showing just how pale and drawn she truly was beneath the dirt and dried blood. You need food, clean clothes, and rest, Isaac said, moving to heat water on his stove. And your wounds need tending. Why are you helping me? Elizabeth asked suddenly, her green eyes searching his face. Isaac paused, surprised by the question. What else would I do? Most men wouldn't stop. Most would ride on by, mind their own business. I'm not most men, he replied simply. And leaving someone in need isn't something I could live with. While water heated, Isaac gathered clean clothes, a shirt and trousers that would be far too big for her slender frame but better than what she wore now, along with soap, bandages, and a jar of salve he used for treating rope burns on his hands. There's a washstand behind that screen, he explained, setting everything on a small table beside it. I'll prepare some food while you clean up. Take your time. Thank you, Elizabeth said, her voice stronger now. She stood carefully and made her way behind the privacy screen. Isaac busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread left from the morning. He could hear water splashing as Elizabeth washed away the evidence of her ordeal. When she emerged some time later, the transformation was remarkable. Even in his oversized clothes, with her damp hair pulled back and her face clean, she was striking. The only reminders of her captivity were the raw, red marks circling her wrists and ankles, and a fading bruise on her left cheek. "That smells wonderful," she said, approaching the table where he'd set out the food. "Nothing fancy, I'm afraid. Bachelor cooking. After days of nothing, it might as well be a feast at the governor's mansion." She offered a small, tentative smile, the first he'd seen, and his heart did an unexpected flip in his chest. They ate in companionable silence, Elizabeth consuming her food with controlled restraint despite what must have been overwhelming hunger. After the meal, Isaac cleared the dishes and poured them both cups of coffee. "Think you're up to telling me what happened?" he asked gently. Elizabeth cradled her cup, staring into the dark liquid. "I was traveling to Oregon," she began, her voice steady but quiet. "My aunt lives in Portland. After my parents died of influenza last winter, there was nothing keeping me in Chicago." She paused, taking a sip of coffee. "I had saved enough for the stagecoach fare. We stopped in Galesburg 3 days ago for a driver change and meal break. That's where I met them 3 men. They seemed respectable enough at first. Said they were ranchers heading to Oregon themselves." Isaac listened intently as she continued. "One of them, James was his name, was particularly charming. He suggested I ride with them the rest of the way since they knew a shortcut that would save days of travel. I was foolish enough to believe him." She shook her head, self-recrimination evident in her expression. "Once we were away from town, everything changed. They took my money, my few possessions. When I protested, Her voice faltered. "They beat me. Said they'd teach me a lesson about trusting strangers." Isaac's hands tightened around his cup. "Did they?" He couldn't bring himself to finish the question. Elizabeth understood. "No, not that. I think they were saving that for when they returned. They chained me in that barn, laughed about how I'd have time to consider my situation before they came back in a week or so." She looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. "They were going to sell me to a brothel in Montana Territory." Isaac's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories of women being abducted for such purposes but had never encountered it firsthand. "They left me there 2 days ago, I think. Said they had business to finish in Galesburg first." Elizabeth's voice grew distant. "I thought I was going to die there. You know their names? What they looked like?" "James was the leader. Never got his last name. Tall, dark hair, scar across his chin. The others were called Butch, and Lou Butch was heavyset with a red beard. Lou was younger, maybe 20, with sandy hair." Isaac committed the descriptions to memory. "We need to tell Sheriff Donovan. These men need to be caught before they do this to someone else." Fear flashed across Elizabeth's face. "They'll kill me if they find out I escaped and talked." "They won't find you," Isaac assured her. "And they won't escape justice either." Elizabeth looked unconvinced but nodded slowly. "Not tonight, though. Please. I can't face town yet." "Of course. You need rest. Tomorrow is soon enough." Isaac stood and gathered some blankets from a chest. "You can take my bed. I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I couldn't take your bed. I insist," he interrupted gently. "It's no hardship. I've slept on harder ground on cattle drives." Too exhausted to argue further, Elizabeth accepted his offer. Isaac showed her to the small bedroom, where a simple bed with a quilt stood against one wall, along with a chest of drawers and a small mirror. "Sleep as long as you need," he told her. "You're safe here." "Thank you, Isaac," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "There's nothing to repay. Get some rest now." Isaac closed the door softly behind him and returned to the main room. He added more wood to the fire and made a pallet for himself on the floor nearby. As he lay down, staring at the dancing shadows on the ceiling, his mind raced. The men who had abducted Elizabeth could still be in Galesburg. If they discovered she was missing, they might come looking for her. His isolated ranch would be an obvious place to search once they learned a local rancher had been seen in the area. He needed to alert the sheriff, but he also needed to ensure Elizabeth's safety. Sleep eluded him as he formulated a plan, listening to the occasional creak of the bed in the next room and the soft sounds of Elizabeth's troubled sleep. Morning came with the soft golden light of dawn filtering through the cabin's small windows. Isaac rose, his body stiff from the hard floor, and quietly stoked the fire before starting breakfast. The smell of coffee and frying bacon soon filled the cabin, but Elizabeth did not emerge. Isaac was just about to check on her when the bedroom door opened. Elizabeth appeared, looking better rested though still pale. She had rolled up the sleeves and pant legs of his clothes to make them somewhat fit her smaller frame. "Good morning," she said, her voice stronger than the day before. "I hope I didn't oversleep." "No such thing," Isaac replied with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Sore, but better." She touched the marks on her wrists self-consciously. "Your salve helped." "Hungry. Starving, actually." They ate breakfast together, the morning sunlight warming the room. Elizabeth seemed more at ease, even managing small talk about the ranch and Isaac's journey from Missouri to Wyoming. She asked intelligent questions about ranching that revealed her own upbringing in rural Illinois before her family moved to Chicago. After breakfast, Isaac outlined his plan. "I need to ride into Galesburg to alert Sheriff Donovan. It's not safe for you to come, those men might still be there." Elizabeth nodded in agreement, relief evident in her expression. "I'll also bring back proper clothes for you. There's a general store that should have what you need." "Is there anything specific I should look for?" "A simple dress would be wonderful," Elizabeth replied. "And perhaps a hairbrush?" "I'm afraid mine was among the things they took." "Consider it done." Isaac paused. "While I'm gone, keep the door locked. There's a shotgun in the cabinet by the door if you need it." "Do you know how to use one?" "My father taught me." "I'm a decent shot, though it's been some time." Isaac nodded, impressed and somewhat relieved. "Good. I shouldn't be gone more than a few hours. If anyone approaches, don't open the door." He gathered his hat and gun belt, checking that the Colt was fully loaded before strapping it on. At the door, he turned back to Elizabeth, who stood watching him with an unreadable expression. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "Be careful," she replied softly. "These men, they're dangerous, Isaac." "So am I when I need to be," he said with a grim smile. "Lock the door behind me." The ride to Galesburg took just over an hour at a steady pace. The small town had grown considerably in recent years, boasting a main street with a general store, saloon, hotel, church, and various other businesses. The sheriff's office stood at the end of the street, a small but sturdy building with a jail attached to the back. Isaac tied his horse at the hitching post and entered to find Sheriff Robert Donovan at his desk, working through a stack of wanted posters. The sheriff looked up, his weathered face breaking into a smile of recognition. "Isaac Zimmerman. Been a while since you've graced our fair town with your presence. What brings you in today? Not trouble, I hope?" "I'm afraid it is trouble, but not of my making." Isaac removed his hat and took a seat opposite the sheriff's desk, recounting Elizabeth's story in detail. Donovan's expression grew increasingly grave as he listened. When Isaac finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair, stroking his gray, streaked mustache thoughtfully. "Damned slave traders," he muttered. "We've had reports of similar operations along the Oregon Trail. Women disappearing during stops, young men too sometimes. Authorities in Cheyenne warned us to be on the lookout. Have you seen men matching their descriptions in town?" Isaac asked. "There were 3 strangers staying at the hotel who might fit the bill. Left yesterday morning. Said they were heading to Billings." Donovan frowned. "If they realize their captive is missing, They might circle back. That's what I'm afraid of. Miss Taylor is at my ranch now. I need to get back to her as soon as possible. I'll send a wire to the marshals in Cheyenne and Billings with descriptions. We'll set up patrols around your property too. In the meantime, she should stay out of sight. Agreed. Isaac stood. I need to pick up a few things for her at the store before heading back. Donovan nodded. Be vigilant, Isaac. These men are not just common thieves. They're organized, and they're ruthless. I will. At Mason's general store, Isaac selected a modest calico dress that he hoped would fit Elizabeth, along with undergarments that the shopkeeper's wife helped him choose with minimal embarrassment on his part. He added a hairbrush, soap, and other personal necessities, along with extra ammunition for his rifle and shotgun. As he was paying, the door opened, and Dr. William Morgan entered. The town's physician was a friend of Isaac's, having once treated him for a nasty gash sustained during a cattle roundup. Isaac, good to see you, the doctor greeted. Stocking up for winter already? Just some supplies, Isaac replied vaguely, aware of curious eyes watching their exchange. The doctor, noting Isaac's reticence, simply nodded. Everything all right out at your place? Fine, thank you. Just busy with the usual. As Isaac gathered his packages, Dr. Morgan approached more closely and spoke in a lower voice. Sheriff Donovan just caught me outside. Mentioned you might need some medical supplies. For a friend. Isaac looked at him sharply, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Stop by my office before you leave town. I'll have a package ready. Appreciate that, document. An hour later, Isaac was riding back toward his ranch. Saddlebags full of supplies and a small medical kit from Dr. Morgan secured behind his saddle. The physician had asked no questions, simply providing salves, bandages, and herbal remedies for pain and inflammation, along with assurance of his discretion. The morning's clear sky had given way to gathering clouds, promising rain by evening. Isaac urged his horse to a faster pace, wanting to reach home before the weather turned. A sense of unease had settled in his gut. The three men could already be on their way back, having discovered their captive missing. Or worse, they might never have left the area at all. As his ranch came into view in the distance, Isaac slowed his horse, scanning the surroundings carefully. Nothing seemed amiss. The cabin stood peacefully, smoke rising from the chimney just as he'd left it. His 2 cows grazed in the small pasture, and chickens pecked in the yard. Still, caution made him approach from behind the stable, tethering his horse out of sight before advancing on foot, his rifle ready. He circled the cabin, checking for signs of visitors, but found none. At the door he knocked softly. Elizabeth? It's Isaac. He heard movement inside, then the sound of the bar being lifted. The door opened just enough for Elizabeth to peer out before opening wider with obvious relief. Thank goodness, she breathed. I was getting worried. Sorry it took longer than expected, Isaac said, entering and setting down his packages. Everything all right here? Yes, quiet as can be. She smiled, and Isaac noticed again how it transformed her face, bringing life to her eyes. Did you speak with the sheriff? I did. He's sending wires to neighboring towns and will have deputies patrolling out this way. Isaac removed his coat and hat. He believes the men left Galesburg yesterday, but we can't be sure they won't return. Elizabeth's smile faded. So I'm still in danger. For now, yes, but we're taking precautions. Isaac gestured to the packages. I brought what you asked for, and some medical supplies from Dr. Morgan. He's discreet, didn't ask questions. Thank you. Elizabeth gathered the packages containing the dress and personal items. I'll just change into these. It'll be nice to wear proper clothes again. While she changed in the bedroom, Isaac secured the cabin, checking that the shotgun was loaded and within easy reach. He placed his rifle by the door and kept his revolver holstered at his side. Elizabeth emerged wearing the calico dress, which fit her better than he'd dared hope. She'd used the brush on her hair, revealing its true honey blonde color, and had tied it back with a ribbon from the package. "The dress is perfect," she said, smoothing the fabric self-consciously. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Isaac cleared his throat, suddenly aware he was staring. "Are you hungry?" "I bought some fresh bread in town." They shared a simple lunch, and Isaac told her more about his conversation with the sheriff. Elizabeth listened attentively, asking occasional questions about the search for her captors. "How long have you lived here?" she asked eventually, changing the subject. "Almost 3 years now. Came out from Missouri in '75. Alone?" "Yes. My father died when I was 20, and my mother remarried. Her new husband didn't need another man on the farm, especially not one with his own ideas about how things should be run." Isaac smiled ruefully. "So I headed west. Worked cattle drives for a few years. Saved enough to buy this place cheap from a homesteader who'd had enough of Wyoming winters. It's a good piece of land," Elizabeth observed. "Tough country, but beautiful in its way." "That it is. What about you? What was your plan in Oregon?" "My aunt owns a dress shop in Portland. She offered me work there after my parents died." Elizabeth looked down at her hands. "I've always been good with a needle. I was hoping to save enough to maybe open a shop of my own someday." "That's still possible," Isaac said gently. "Once these men are caught, you can continue your journey." Elizabeth nodded, but something in her expression suggested doubt. "Perhaps, though I admit the prospect of traveling alone again is frightening now." The afternoon passed with domestic tranquility that felt strangely natural to Isaac. Elizabeth insisted on helping with chores, demonstrating that she was indeed familiar with rural life. Despite her ordeal, she moved with increasing strength, though Isaac noticed her wincing occasionally when she thought he wasn't looking. By evening, rain began to fall, a steady patter on the cabin's roof. They prepared dinner together, their movements around the small kitchen becoming a comfortable dance as Elizabeth learned where things were kept. After the meal, they sat by the fire, the storm outside growing stronger. "Tell me about Chicago," Isaac said, breaking a comfortable silence. "I've never been to a big city." Elizabeth smiled, remembering. "It's nothing like this. Buildings so tall they block the sun. Streets packed with people and carriages. Noise at all hours." She traced patterns on the arm of her chair. "After the Great Fire, they rebuilt much of it in brick and stone. It's quite grand now, but I always missed the countryside where I grew up." "No family left there?" "No, just distant cousins I barely know." Her expression turned melancholy. "My father moved us to the city for business opportunities that never quite materialized. He was always chasing the next great venture." Isaac nodded, understanding. "My father was similar. Always had a scheme to make the farm more profitable. Some worked, most didn't." "What made you choose ranching?" "I like the freedom of it, the open country. And there's something honest about the work that appeals to me." He stoked the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "Even when it's back-breaking and the elements are against you, there's satisfaction in it." Elizabeth was about to respond when a sound cut through the drumming of the rain horses approaching. Isaac was on his feet instantly, motioning for Elizabeth to stay quiet as he moved to the window, carefully peering out without disturbing the curtain. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could make out 3 riders approaching the cabin. His heart sank as recognition dawned. Even through the darkness and rain, he could identify the large figure of a man with a red beard. "It's them," he whispered urgently, turning to Elizabeth, whose face had drained of color. "The 3 men from your description." How did they find me? She gasped, rising from her chair. Doesn't matter now. We need to move. Isaac quickly gathered his rifle and ammunition. Is there somewhere I can hide? Elizabeth asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite her evident fear. Isaac considered their options. The cabin offered few hiding places, and any thorough search would reveal her presence. Fighting was risky, he was outnumbered, and these men were clearly dangerous. The root cellar, he decided suddenly. There's an entrance under the rug in the pantry. It's small, but you'll fit. They hurried to the pantry where Isaac pulled back a small rug, revealing a trapdoor. He lifted it, exposing a narrow ladder leading down into darkness. It's not deep, but stay quiet no matter what you hear, he instructed, handing her a small knife from his belt. Take this just in case. Elizabeth descended quickly, her face a mask of determination despite her fear. Isaac handed down a blanket and a lantern that he lit with a match. Don't light this unless you absolutely must. I'll get rid of them as quickly as I can. Be careful, Isaac, she whispered, reaching up to briefly touch his hand. These men, they enjoy hurting people. I'll be fine. Stay silent. He closed the trapdoor and replaced the rug just as a heavy knock sounded at the front door. Isaac took a deep breath, checked that his revolver was accessible, and moved to answer it, adopting an air of casual irritation at being disturbed during the storm. Who's there? He called through the door. Travelers seeking shelter from this infernal rain. Came the reply, a deep voice with a southern drawl. Our camp washed out down by the creek. Isaac unbolted the door and opened it partially, his body blocking the entrance. 3 men stood on his porch, water streaming from their hats and coats. The descriptions Elizabeth had provided were accurate: James with his scarred chin, Butch with his red beard, and young Lou with sandy hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. Mighty late for social calls, Isaac said coolly. Apologize for the intrusion, replied James, tipping his hat. Name's James Blackburn. These are my associates, Butch Larson and Lou Farley. We're cattle buyers heading north. Had a camp set up by the creek, but this storm had other ideas. Saw your light, added Butch, his small eyes darting past Isaac to survey the cabin's interior. Thought you might offer shelter till the rain passes. Isaac pretended to consider this, then stepped back reluctantly. Come in, then, but I've got limited space and supplies. The 3 men entered, bringing the smell of wet leather and horses with them. Isaac noted that all were armed, revolvers at their hips and James carrying a rifle slung across his back. Mighty kind of you, James said, removing his hat and looking around the cabin with assessing eyes. Nice place you've got. You live here alone. Just me and the livestock, Isaac replied, closing the door but leaving it unbolted. Coffee's still hot if you want some. Appreciate that, James said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Isaac moved to the stove, keeping the 3 men in his peripheral vision as he poured coffee into tin cups. His revolver remained at his side, and his rifle stood within reach by the door. What brings cattle buyers to this part of Wyoming? He asked casually, passing out the cups. Not much trade around here this time of year. We go where the opportunities are, James replied smoothly. Had some business in Galesburg, now heading up to Montana territory. You raise cattle here? Just a few head. Nothing worth your interest. James nodded, sipping his coffee while his eyes continued to roam the cabin. Been here long? Few years. Know the area well, then? There was something pointed in James's question that raised Isaac's hackles. Well enough. Seen any strangers passing through recently? Young woman, maybe? Isaac maintained a neutral expression. Can't say I have. I keep to myself mostly. Why do you ask? James exchanged glances with his companions before answering. Our sister, he lied smoothly, ran off from our farm in Colorado. Disturbed in the head. Poor thing. We've been tracking her for weeks. Thought she might have passed this way. Sorry to hear that, Isaac said, feigning sympathy. But no, haven't seen any women around here. Town's your best bet for information. Already tried there, Butch cut in gruffly. Nobody's seen her, but we heard a rancher was asking questions about 3 men matching our descriptions. Thought that was mighty curious. Isaac's stomach tightened, but he kept his face impassive. Lot of ranchers go into town. Wasn't me. No. James's tone was dangerously soft. Sheriff seemed to think it was. Isaac Zimmerman, he said. That would be you, wouldn't it? The pretense was evaporating quickly. Isaac set down his coffee cup, his hand moving closer to his revolver. If you gentlemen are looking for someone, I suggest you continue your search elsewhere. I can't help you. Lou, the youngest, had been silently circling the room and now stood near the pantry. Place seems awful tidy for a bachelor, he observed, nudging the rug with his boot. And smells like a woman's been here. Soap and such. That's enough, Isaac said sharply. I think it's time you moved on. Rain or no rain. James's hand moved to his own weapon. I don't think we will. Not until we've had a proper look around. You see, we lost something valuable near here, and we mean to find it. There's nothing here that belongs to you, Isaac replied, his voice hardening. Oh, I think there is, James countered, his friendly demeanor completely gone now. And I think you know exactly where she is. The tension in the room was palpable. All 4 men poised on the edge of violence. Isaac knew he was at a disadvantage, outnumbered, and with Elizabeth potentially in danger if gunfire erupted near the root cellar. Last chance, Isaac warned, his hand now resting on his revolver. Leave now, and we'll forget this conversation happened. James laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. You're in no position to make demands, rancher. Now where's she? Before Isaac could respond, the cabin door burst open. Sheriff Donovan stood in the doorway, his deputy flanking him, both with shotguns raised. Evening, gentlemen, the sheriff said calmly. Having a nice chat? The sudden appearance of law enforcement momentarily froze everyone in place. James recovered first, his hand still hovering near his gun. Just sheltering from the rain, Sheriff. This kind rancher was offering hospitality. Is that so? Donovan's eyes narrowed. Funny coincidence, you 3 turning up here after I sent wires about men matching your descriptions. Men wanted for kidnapping and slave trading from St. Louis to Denver. You're mistaken, James said, tension evident in his voice. We're simple cattle buyers. With no cattle, no money to buy them, and wanted posters in 3 territories. The sheriff's shotgun remained steady. Now all of you put your weapons on the floor. Slowly. For a moment it seemed James might resist, his eyes calculating as they darted between the lawman and Isaac. Then, with deliberate slowness, he removed his revolver and placed it on the floor. Butch reluctantly followed suit. Young Lou, however, made a fatal error. He drew his gun in a lightning-fast motion, aiming at the deputy. The shotgun blast that followed was deafening in the confined space of the cabin. Lou was thrown backward, his chest a bloody ruin, dead before he hit the floor. In the chaos that followed, Butch lunged for his discarded weapon, only to freeze when Isaac's Colt pressed against his temple. Don't, Isaac advised coldly. James, seeing his men subdued, raised his hands in surrender. This is a misunderstanding, he insisted, though the confidence had drained from his voice. Save it for the judge, Donovan replied, directing his deputy to cuff the prisoners. Where's Miss Taylor? He asked Isaac. Safe, Isaac replied, holstering his weapon once the deputy had secured the two remaining kidnappers. Let me get her. He moved to the pantry, pulled back the rug, and opened the trapdoor. Elizabeth? It's over. You can come up now. Elizabeth emerged from the root cellar, shaking but composed. When she saw James and Butch in handcuffs, visible relief washed over her features, followed by a flash of satisfaction. Miss Taylor, Sheriff Donovan acknowledged with a respectful nod. Glad to see you safe. I'll need your statement about what these men did to you. You'll have it, she replied firmly, stepping forward to look James in the eye. Every detail. James's face contorted with rage. You stupid. That's enough out of you. The deputy interrupted, roughly pushing him toward the door. We found their camp down by the creek, Donovan explained to Isaac. Got worried when we saw them heading this way. Good thing we followed. Good thing indeed, Isaac agreed, his eyes on Elizabeth, who stood tall despite the ordeal she'd endured. The deputy led the prisoners outside to waiting horses, while Sheriff Donovan remained a moment longer. We'll need both of you to come to town tomorrow to make formal statements, he said. These men will face justice for what they've done. I promise you that. We'll be there, Isaac assured him. After the lawmen departed with their prisoners, the cabin fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the continuing patter of rain on the roof. Elizabeth stood motionless, staring at the bloodstain on the floor where Lou had fallen. Are you all right? Isaac asked gently, approaching her. Yes, she said after a moment. I can't believe it's over. It is. They can't hurt you or anyone else now. Elizabeth nodded, then suddenly began to tremble violently. Isaac guided her to a chair by the fire, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as shock set in. It's natural, he assured her, kneeling beside her chair. The danger's past, and your body's releasing all the fear you've been holding back. I thought they would kill you, she whispered. When I heard their voices, I was so afraid. But they didn't, and now they're going to pay for their crimes. Isaac took her hand, noting how cold it felt despite the warmth of the fire. You're safe now, Elizabeth. Truly safe. She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. Because of you. Because you survived, he countered. You held on until help came. That took incredible strength. A small, tremulous smile touched her lips. Perhaps we both played our parts. Isaac returned her smile, still holding her hand. Perhaps we did. The storm continued through the night, but inside the cabin, a different kind of calm had settled. Elizabeth eventually fell asleep in the chair, exhaustion finally claiming her. Isaac carefully carried her to his bed, removed her shoes, and covered her with a quilt before returning to clean up the grim reminder of the evening's violence. By morning, the rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows. Isaac had slept little, keeping watch through the night despite knowing the danger had passed. He was preparing breakfast when Elizabeth joined him, looking rested despite everything. Good morning, she greeted, tucking a strand of honey-blonde hair behind her ear. Morning. How did you sleep? Surprisingly well, she admitted. I think knowing they're locked up allowed me to truly rest for the first time in days. They ate breakfast discussing their upcoming visit to town to give statements. Elizabeth seemed more confident in the daylight, the shadow of fear gradually lifting from her features. What will you do after this? Isaac asked as they washed the dishes together. Will you continue to Oregon? Elizabeth paused, considering. I don't know. The journey seems different now, tainted somehow. You could stay in Galesburg until you're ready, Isaac suggested. I'm sure the hotel would give you a room, or Mrs. Morgan, the doctor's wife, might take you in while you decide. That's kind of you to arrange. Elizabeth set down the dish she was drying, turning to face him directly. "You've done so much for me already, Isaac. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said with quiet certainty. "They wouldn't have. Most would have ridden past that barn without a second thought. You didn't just free me from chains, you gave me back my life." Isaac felt his cheeks warm at her earnest gratitude. "Well, I'm glad I was the one who found you then." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Isaac cleared his throat and suggested they prepare for the ride to town. The journey to Galesburg was uneventful, the landscape freshened by the previous night's rain. Elizabeth rode her own horse this time, a gentle mare Isaac kept for working cattle. She sat confidently in the saddle, further evidence of her rural upbringing. In town, their arrival drew curious stares. News of the previous night's events had clearly spread, and townsfolk watched openly as they made their way to the sheriff's office. Inside, they found Sheriff Donovan at his desk, paperwork spread before him. "Miss Taylor, Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for coming promptly." "How are the prisoners?" Isaac asked. "Secure. James is sullen but cooperative. Butch tried to claim they were framed, but his story fell apart quickly." Donovan gestured for them to sit. "Now, I need your statements, everything that happened from the beginning." For the next hour, Elizabeth recounted her ordeal in careful detail: the initial meeting in town, the abduction, her days chained in the abandoned barn, and finally, Isaac's arrival. Isaac then described finding Elizabeth and the subsequent confrontation at his ranch. Donovan took meticulous notes. "The circuit judge arrives next week. You'll both need to testify, but with these statements and the evidence we found at their camp, including personal effects belonging to at least 2 other women, they'll hang for certain." "What about the other women?" Elizabeth asked, concern evident in her voice. "No sign of them," Donovan replied grimly. "Based on documents we found, they were already transported north. Federal marshals have been notified." Elizabeth nodded, a shadow crossing her face at the thought of others suffering a fate she had narrowly escaped. After completing their statements, they stepped back into the bright morning sunshine. The town was fully awake now, with wagons and riders moving along the main street and businesses open for the day. "I should inquire about a room at the hotel," Elizabeth said, looking toward the 2-story building down the street. Isaac hesitated, then spoke. "You're welcome to stay at my ranch until you decide your next steps. If you'd prefer the hotel, I understand completely, but the offer stands." Elizabeth studied his face, considering. "Are you certain? I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition. The ranch is quiet, and you might find it easier to recover your strength away from curious eyes." He gestured to several townspeople who were openly watching them from across the street. After a moment, Elizabeth nodded. "I think I'd like that, at least for a few days." "Thank you." They spent another hour in town, visiting the general store where Isaac insisted on purchasing additional clothes and necessities for Elizabeth. She protested at first but eventually accepted with grace, promising to repay him once she accessed her aunt's promised funds. Dr. Morgan examined Elizabeth's wrists and ankles, declaring that they were healing well but providing additional salve and clean bandages. His wife, Martha, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked dark hair, invited them for tea. "It's not every day we get to meet a genuine heroine," Martha declared, serving Elizabeth a cup of fragrant tea and a slice of freshly baked apple cake. "I'm hardly that," Elizabeth protested. "I simply survived." "Sometimes that's the most heroic act of all," Martha replied wisely. "And from what I hear, you faced those villains with remarkable courage when they were captured." The Morgans' comfortable parlor provided a welcome respite from the scrutiny of the town. By the time Isaac and Elizabeth departed for the ranch, Elizabeth seemed more at ease, having found allies in the doctor and his wife. The next 2 weeks established a routine that felt increasingly natural. Elizabeth recovered her strength rapidly, helping with household tasks and learning about ranch operations. Isaac taught her to feed the chickens and milk the cows, skills she adapted to quickly despite her city years. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking long into the night. Isaac shared stories of cattle drives and frontier adventures, while Elizabeth spoke of Chicago's grand buildings and cultural events, as well as her childhood on her family's Illinois farm. "I never thought I'd miss farm life," she admitted one evening as they sat shelling peas for dinner. "In Chicago, I longed for the sophistication of city life. Now I find myself appreciating the simplicity here." "Wyoming grows on you," Isaac agreed, "though I wouldn't call ranch work simple." Elizabeth laughed, a sound that had become more frequent and that Isaac found increasingly captivating. "True. Simple isn't the right word. Authentic, perhaps." The day of the trial arrived, bringing with it a mixture of anxiety and determination. Elizabeth wore her newest dress, a deep blue calico that complemented her now healthy complexion and brought out the green of her eyes. Isaac donned his one good shirt and coat, rarely worn except for special occasions. The courthouse in Galesburg was packed with curious onlookers when they arrived. James and Butch sat sullenly at the defense table, shackled and guarded. The circuit judge, a stern-faced man named Harrington, called the court to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. Elizabeth's testimony came first. She stood before the court with quiet dignity, recounting her ordeal without embellishment or dramatics. Her clear, steady voice carried to every corner of the room, and Isaac felt a surge of pride at her composure. When it was his turn to testify, Isaac described finding Elizabeth chained in the barn and the subsequent confrontation at his ranch. Judge Harrington asked pointed questions about the events leading to Lou Farley's death, but ultimately ruled the shooting justified. Other witnesses followed Sheriff Donovan, his deputy, and even a cattleman from Denver who identified James and Butch as men who had abducted a young woman from a stagecoach stop months earlier. The evidence was overwhelming. After deliberating for less than an hour, the judge found both men guilty of kidnapping, assault, and human trafficking. His sentence was unequivocal: hanging to be carried out in 2 days' time. As they left the courthouse, Elizabeth was subdued. "I thought I'd feel satisfaction," she confessed as they rode back to the ranch. "But I just feel empty." "Justice doesn't always bring the comfort we expect," Isaac replied, "but it does mean they can never hurt anyone else." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "My aunt's last letter arrived yesterday. She still wants me to come to Portland." Isaac's heart sank at this reminder that Elizabeth's stay was temporary. Over the past weeks, her presence had transformed his solitary existence in ways he hadn't anticipated. The cabin felt warmer, more like a home than just a place to sleep. The thought of returning to his previous isolation left him hollow. "When will you leave?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "I haven't decided." Elizabeth glanced at him sidelong. "Part of me feels I should continue as planned. Start the life I intended. And the other part?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The other part wonders if plans can change. If sometimes life takes us in directions we never anticipated." Hope kindled in Isaac's chest, but he tempered it with caution. "Whatever you decide, know that you're welcome here for as long as you wish to stay." That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in spectacular oranges and purples. The air was cool but not cold, perfect for sitting outside with mugs of hot coffee. "I never thanked you properly," Elizabeth said suddenly, "for saying those words that day in the barn." Isaac looked at her questioningly. "When you broke the lock," she clarified, "you said, 'You're free.' At the time I could barely comprehend it, but those words, they meant everything." I remember, Isaac said softly. I've been thinking about freedom a lot, she continued. What it truly means is not just the absence of chains, is it? It's the ability to choose your own path. I believe so, yes. Elizabeth turned to face him fully. Then I've made my choice. I'm not going to Portland. Isaac's heart quickened. May I ask why? Because in these past weeks, I found something I never expected. Her eyes held his steadily. I found a place that feels like home, and someone who makes me feel both safe and brave at the same time. Isaac set down his coffee mug and reached for her hand. Elizabeth, are you saying? I'm saying that I care for you, Isaac Zimmerman, more than I thought possible in such a short time. Her fingers tightened around his. And if you feel the same, I'd like to stay here with you. Joy surged through Isaac, bright and overwhelming. I do feel the same. I have for weeks now, but I didn't want to speak of it when your future was so uncertain. It's not uncertain anymore. Elizabeth's smile was radiant in the fading light. Unless you're having second thoughts about having a city girl on your ranch permanently. In answer, Isaac leaned forward and kissed her. A gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened with shared emotion. When they finally parted, both were breathless. No second thoughts, he assured her, resting his forehead against hers. None at all. They were married 2 months later in Galesburg's small church. Martha Morgan had helped Elizabeth sew a simple but elegant wedding dress, and Dr. Morgan stood as Isaac's best man. Sheriff Donovan gave the bride away, declaring it his official duty to ensure she ended up in good hands. The townsfolk, initially curious about the woman rescued from kidnappers, had embraced Elizabeth as one of their own. Her intelligence and warm manner had won them over, and many attended the wedding to wish the couple well. As winter settled over Wyoming, Isaac and Elizabeth expanded the cabin, adding a second bedroom and enlarging the main room to accommodate the furniture. Elizabeth ordered from Chicago a bookcase for her small collection of beloved books, a comfortable rocking chair, and a writing desk where she began offering sewing lessons to local girls. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Additional cattle, a vegetable garden that thrived under Elizabeth's care, and plans for a proper orchard. By summer, the transformation was remarkable. The once bachelor dwelling had become a true home, filled with warmth and purpose. One evening, as they sat on their expanded porch watching a spectacular sunset, Elizabeth took Isaac's hand and placed it gently on her belly. I have news, she said, her eyes shining with joy. Understanding dawned immediately. A baby? You're certain? Dr. Morgan confirmed it yesterday. By winter, we'll be 3 instead of 2. Isaac gathered her into his arms, overcome with emotion. From the moment he'd broken that lock and said those 2 simple words, "You're free," his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. Their son, Robert James Zimmerman, was born on a snowy December night in 1879, with Martha Morgan assisting in the delivery. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's determined chin, a perfect blend of them both. As Isaac held his son for the first time, gazing down at the tiny face that represented their future, Elizabeth watched them with exhausted happiness. He's perfect, Isaac whispered, carefully returning the baby to his mother's arms. He is, Elizabeth agreed, kissing the infant's downy head. And free, born free, to grow up knowing only love and safety. That's all I want for him, Isaac said, sitting beside them on the bed and wrapping his arm around his wife's shoulders. To know the freedom to choose his own path, just as we did. Elizabeth leaned against him, their family complete in this moment of perfect contentment. We chose well, didn't we? Better than I ever dreamed possible, Isaac replied, kissing her temple gently. Outside, snow continued to fall on their ranch, no longer just a place of solitude, but a home built on courage, compassion, and a love that had begun with an act of liberation on a summer day in an abandoned barn. 5 years passed, bringing prosperity to the Zimmerman ranch. Their herd grew, as did their family, with the addition of a daughter, Clara Elizabeth, born in the spring of 1882. The cabin expanded again, becoming a proper ranch house with a wide veranda where the children played under their parents' watchful eyes. Elizabeth's sewing lessons evolved into a small business, creating custom garments for Galesburg's growing population. Isaac's cattle operation thrived, allowing them to hire 2 ranch hands to help with the increasing workload. Robert grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's quick mind and his father's love of the land. Clara, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, charmed everyone she met with her infectious laugh and adventurous spirit. In the summer of 1883, the family traveled to Chicago, where Elizabeth showed her children and husband the city of her young adulthood. They visited her parents' graves, laying flowers and telling stories of the grandparents the children would never know. From Chicago, they continued west to Portland, finally meeting Elizabeth's aunt, who had long since forgiven her niece for choosing love over the original plan. The elderly woman delighted in her grandniece and grandnephew, declaring them perfect combinations of their remarkable parents. Upon returning to Wyoming, Elizabeth and Isaac were surprised to find Galesburg transformed. The railroad had finally reached the town, bringing new businesses, settlers, and opportunities. Sheriff Donovan, now gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, greeted them with news of the town's growth and the changing frontier. "They're calling it the taming of the West," he told them over dinner at their ranch one evening. "Don't know if I like the sound of that, but change is coming whether we welcome it or not. As long as there's still open sky and room to breathe, I can accept some changes," Isaac replied, watching his children play with the sheriff's new puppy in the yard. "You two built something special here," Donovan observed. "Not just a ranch, but a legacy." Elizabeth smiled, reaching for Isaac's hand. "It all started with a broken lock and 2 simple words. 'You're free,'" Isaac murmured, squeezing her fingers. "Best words I ever spoke." As twilight settled over the Wyoming prairie that evening, with their children safely tucked into bed and the day's work complete, Isaac and Elizabeth stood on their veranda watching the first stars appear. 10 years had passed since that fateful day in the abandoned barn, yet the memory remained vivid for them both, not as a nightmare, but as the beginning of their shared journey. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't heard me that day?" Elizabeth asked softly. "If you'd ridden past the barn without stopping?" Isaac turned to her, framing her face with his hands. Even after a decade, the sight of her still filled him with wonder and gratitude. "I don't believe that was ever possible. Some things are meant to be, Elizabeth. We were always going to find each other. Freedom and love," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. "You gave me both, and you gave me a home," he replied, "in every sense of the word." Above them, the vast Wyoming sky spread out like a promise, endless, challenging, and beautiful, much like the life they had built together from the moment he had broken her chains and set her free.